This is a Lost in Portland podcast celebrating our community and bringing celebrity home to Portland, Oregon. Keep up to date with our latest shows at lostinportland.com. That's lost, the letter N, portland.com.
Hello, I'm Hayley Lynn, and welcome to Emerge PDX, Portland's locally run musician-focused podcast, showcasing the best established and emerging artists in the greater Portland area. It's our purpose to explore the artist's journey of how they found their sound, songwriting, collaborations, and stories on the road. What does it take to emerge from the music scene and make a lasting impact? Join us each week on our podcast, or be there for the live experience each month at Strum Guitars to be part of the show. You won't want to miss it.
Recording with a live audience in the Rose City's Buckman neighborhood at Strum Guitars Beer and Music. Welcome to Emerge with Hayley Lynn. Tonight, welcome to the stage, Amy Hakanson.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you are on our podcast. I've known you for a while, and it's just so great to have your talent on this show. Really stoked to have you here. I love to tell the audience a little bit about your history. When you were growing up, you've always had music around. You actually had a family band. Mm-hmm. What was your first instrument that you played? I played the fiddle first, starting when I was about 2 years old. My sister was 6, and she started taking violin lessons, and I apparently demanded a fiddle. And I was 2, so.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic, like 2. And did your family have a band name?
We were just the Hakanson family band. It wasn't very exciting.
Well, it's still so cute, though. I love that. So you've been exploring music your whole life. It's your biggest passion, and you have a very strong passion for a certain kind of music, Scandinavian folk music, traditional Scandinavian folk music. What has been your experience exploring that whole world? Yeah.
It's kind of a long story. It probably started like 12 years ago when I first saw the band Vessen, and I highly recommend them if anybody out there wants to check this music out. They played at a bluegrass festival called Wintergrass, and that was my first introduction to this instrument and that kind of music. They're from Sweden. I just kind of got more and more into it. I listened to their CDs and started discovering other bands on the internet. And in 2013, I decided I wanted to buy my own nickel harpa. And in 2014, I did. And about a month after I got my instrument, the nickel harpa player from that band gave a workshop, which I attended. And he told me about this school he taught at in Sweden. It was a year-long program. And So I went 6 months later and spent a year there immersed at this tiny school in a forest, hour and a half north of Stockholm, playing nyckelharpa for, 8 hours a day and dancing in the evenings. And it was quite the experience and kind of a crash course in traditional Swedish folk music.
Well, that's fantastic. That's definitely being immersed into the entire instrument. And for our listeners at home, I wish you guys could see this because it's such a beautiful instrument. To those who have never seen it before, or to those who have only heard it off of this podcast, Amy, what is your best way to really describe this to our listeners at home?
It's really difficult to. I would just Google image search and nyckelharpa first thing. Nyckelharpa. You could spell it like the coin and then the harp, and you'll get there. But basically, it's a bowed instrument, like a violin, and then it's keyed on the left hand instead of having a fingerboard that you push your fingers onto. So it's the closest instrument to it is probably a hurdy-gurdy, but a hurdy-gurdy is cranked. It has this rosined wheel that's cranked, and this one is bowed. So we can do a little more, I think, with a nyckelharpa. There's some rivalry between the nyckelharpa world and the hurdy-gurdy world.
I just kind of imagine like two people, one with a hurdy-gurdy and one with the nyckelharpa, just kind of battling it out, kind of. What's that game called? You play it at arcade?
I didn't play video games as a kid. I played the fiddle.
Apparently me neither, but it's so interesting because it has such a history to it. Like how do you know when the first nyckelharpa was made?
Yeah, that was part of my very useful and applicable education in Sweden, learning the history of this instrument. So the earliest examples of this instrument are actually carvings in a church on Gotland, which is an island off of the coast of Stockholm. They were much simpler and smaller, and they had more guitar-shaped bodies instead of this sort of violin-shaped body. Those carvings are from the 1350s, so a good 700 plus years ago, and there's evidence. There was a wooden key found in an archaeological dig that's been dated to the 1100s, and that's contentious because some hurdy-gurdy people think it's a hurdy-gurdy key, and we think it's a nyckelharpa key. But we definitely know that nyckelharpas, these keyed fiddles, again, they were much simpler than this one, existed, 700-800 years ago. So.
Wow. So it's been around a while. That's so interesting. That's so incredible. And the one thing I really love that you've been doing is you have this vast knowledge of the traditional way of performing it, but you have your own fusion style of it, which for those of our listeners at home who've listened to Amy before, and you've heard her version of Fable by the band Intervals, then you know that she not only has her own wonderful take on it. You're incorporating traditional playing with a more modern-day fusion of it within your own playing, but within your own band, too. Your own Scandinavian fusion band called
Varelsa.
Like, I'm going to get this. And I'm like, okay. But it's been so wonderful to see, as someone who's been following you for a while, to see this band kind of flourish and come to be, and you being the head of it, but also like everybody having their own beautiful part of it too. And I heard that you have 2 singles that you've been working on that you plan on releasing this fall?
Yeah. So we started playing together just over a year ago in September of 2018, and I almost immediately got us in a studio and said we have to record an album, because I think especially in the roots world and the traditional music world, you want to have an example of your music. You want to be able to send people CDs, and I think especially in folk music, CDs are still alive and well. Yeah. So I got us in the studio right away, and it was kind of me driven. I had written most of the songs and was producing the album. And now we've been together a little while, and we're trying to write more collaboratively. So one of the songs, these 2 singles, was written by our percussionist, who plays this little, it's called an umbira, and it's an African thumb piano. and he wrote this little melody on it, and it's very like sort of hypnotic and sounds very different than traditional Swedish music. And it's really fun to like get these interesting instruments that come from different parts of the world. So we are nyckelharpa, fiddle, and a 6-string guitar, so like a modern guitar, and then all of these different hand percussion instruments from across Africa and the Middle East that our percussionist plays. And it's really cool to like just throw all these traditions together and see what comes out. We've been having a lot of fun. So
that's fantastic. That's phenomenal. And I can't wait to hear more of what you have to share with us today. So let's continue this beautiful set.
Yeah. It's Halloween, so I'm going to do another kind of spooky sounding one, I think. It's another traditional tune. That one is called Valåts variant. It's just a traditional tune from Orsa, which is in western Sweden. I'll play one that I wrote now. that tune's called Michinobu Slang Polska. All right, I'll play one of my very favorite tunes. This was written by a man named Eric Sahlstrom, who kept this instrument alive over the last century. For there were a few decades where he was the only living builder who knew how to build these instruments, and he started giving workshops on building them, and that's why I have one at all. So this is a tune he wrote called Spelmans Glädje, which means the musician's joy, basically.
Well, Amy, that was such a treat. Your music is phenomenal. It kind of takes you to a really beautiful place. It doesn't kind of, it does. And it's really a blessing to have you on our show. So thank you so much for sharing your music with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
This is a Lost in Portland production.